There are two extremely different categories of computer graphics, one called raster and one called vector. Raster graphics are made up of pixels, whereas vector graphics are made up of curves and points and math. I know that might sound weird that graphics are made up of math, but let's go ahead and open up the raster versus vector document that I provided you with, and you'll see, when we press Command 1 and zoom out, you'll see that we've got a bunch of shapes here, and I've written some notes on here to make it easier to see exactly what we're looking for. I'm going to start by zooming in on the square, and I'm going to do that by selecting it and pressing Command 2 on my keyboard. And when I zoom in, this square looks pretty good. This is the vector square. If I go over to the right, this is the raster square made of pixels. You'll notice they pretty much look the same. It's very hard to tell them apart. But let's go down to the rounded rectangle. The rounded rectangle on the left is a vector rectangle, and if we zoom way in, I'll press Command plus to zoom way in, you'll notice a pixel grid appears on the screen, but you'll also notice that the edge of the shape, even at the curve, looks absolutely perfect. It's razor sharp. That's because this vector graphic is made up of points, and those points have mathematical curves applied to them called Bezier curves, and those Bezier curves dictate the shape of the curve regardless of the resolution of the screen and regardless of the size that we're viewing it at. So these vector graphics can actually be scaled to any size. It doesn't matter how big they get, they never lose any quality or become pixelated. Let's compare it to the raster version on the right. Now what you'll find here is that the raster version is super pixelated around the edges. This has a resolution associated with it. This is made of pixels, although it looks like the same object from far away. Because it's made of pixels, if you get in there close enough, you can see the pixels. And if we were to make this larger, we would see the pixels more and more and more, just like we do when we zoom in. So if we keep going down, we're going to find that there's a circle. And circles are pretty bad, because you'll notice that the pixelization takes place mostly around the curved parts, around the areas that are not perfectly straight. Remember how the square at the top looked pretty good just about all around it? The circle, on the other hand, is a drastic difference. I'll zoom out just a little bit so it's easier to see and to hide that pixel grid. So it's not easier to see the pixelization, now it's more difficult to see, but it's still super obvious even though we've zoomed out a bit. So it's not a pretty thing. If we go down to the triangle looks like a pyramid. Those pixels are kind of blurred together, they're kind of softened up. That's something called anti-aliasing that tries to smooth out this hard stair-stepping effect that we get when we go from pixel to pixel on a diagonal or curved line. But you'll notice that over here on the left, there is none of that, because that is the vector version. Now what I've done here is I've drawn these vector shapes in Sketch. Sketch is a vector drawing application, so any of the shapes that you create will automatically be vector and will not be subject to pixelization unless they're exported and then defined as raster graphics. Now the one on the right hand side, that is an exported and re-imported raster graphic version of the vector triangle on the left. So this isn't what you're going to get in Sketch unless you're bringing in images that are raster graphics. And the idea of raster graphics is a lot of things need to be made of pixels. Photographs, for instance, digital photography, those are all raster graphics. They're all made of pixels. But the bottom line is, if you're editing something, you're probably going to be changing the size, you're probably going to be twisting it around and contorting it, and with that, you want to make sure as many objects are vector as possible, because you get the ultimate editability, you get the ultimate scalability, and until you go to export something out of Sketch, you don't have to worry about pixelization at all. So again, everything that we draw in Sketch is going to be a vector graphic. We're only going to find ourselves dealing with raster graphics when we bring in external files like photographs.